And today on the show, we discuss the pros and cons of the current education systems across Africa. Does the curriculum need an overhaul? What should change about it? But just before that, to let you know that we're going to be hosting Professor James Ole Kiapi, who is going to be speaking about the education systems across Africa. And remember, you can reach us on Twitter, where we ask the question, do you think the current curriculum is worth it? But before that, let's take a look at Web City, where we asked, what can we do to tell the African story better online, and like what we see being told across the world? On social media, we asked, how best can Africa tell her story online under the hashtag The Unknown Africa. At K Kagumaho says we should allow our entertainment industries to grow and tell our stories with utmost honesty. And at Adan K says create the need for stories, then employ existing platforms like Wikipedia and create others as well. We should focus on innovation and ideas to create the need for the world to search Africa online. At Amiji Vivian says through photos of achievements, videos of projects that have succeeded, as well as blogs. Now, tell me something. Are you 30 years and over? Just how often do you look through your pictures of old? That's right, I guess it's not so often. So let's take you back through a scan of a picture tweeted from Nigeria on the kind of clothes you might have been wearing during that time. On Click, we take you back in time. Just how many of your brothers dressed like this back in the day? Then baggy pants and trousers were the thing of the present. Conclusion is that Africa has evolved in terms of fashion. Well, there we go. I'm sure there are quite a number of people here. I just posed the same question to Professor Ole Kiapi, but I guess we'll get his response in a short while. Now, it is estimated that about 133 million young people, that is more than 50% of the youth population in Africa, are illiterate. Many young people have little or no skills and are therefore largely excluded from productive economic and social life. Those that have some education often exhibit skills irrelevant to the current demand in the labor market, in a situation where educational and skill requirements are increasing, resulting in millions of unemployed and underemployed youth. Now, the incidence of youth unemployment in sub-Saharan Africa is estimated to be over 20%. And too often, vocational training is seen as a means to help bring young people back when the basic education system has failed. And that is the notion of giving a second chance, or as a top-up to the basic knowledge base that young people will need to help prepare them for the immediate needs of the world of work. And of course, this is yet another notion of continuous adaptation or readaptation to a flexible and constantly changing labor market. This type of vocational training needs to be replaced or supplemented by an educational option which can provide young people with a maximum set of durable achievements in terms of literacy, basic knowledge, and lifelong learning skills. Vocational training also has a very specific purpose, that is to improve skills related to specific technologies and also to develop them further in the workplace. But education in Africa began as a tool to prepare the local youth to take their place in their respective societies and not necessarily for life outside Africa. However, the post-colonial education system in most African countries is bent on turning the beneficiaries into job seekers other than job creators, and those who perform under average are left with not many options. Some drop out while others enroll in vocational training schools or colleges. Let's take a listen to this story by KTN's Asha Mwilu on the options for the perceived failures of academically set examinations.
A classroom full of aspiring engineers. But in reality, almost every student in this room has not gone beyond primary school. This is the auto mechanics class in Kisauni Polytechnic. For 3 years, these boys will learn the intrigues of motor vehicles as they seek to begin their careers as auto technicians. Next door, the girls are learning a different trade. Their hair and beauty course will take only 1.5 years. Just like the boys, they sat their KCPE exams, but low grades and lack of tuition fees ended their formal education. The Polytechnic was their next best choice.
Kija kama hapa, kuna subject ambayo inaitwa artisan. Na ukisema ukimaliza huo mtihani wake, utakuwa sawa na ule mwenye amefanya form 4. Naweza enda hata university tukafanya kama ni diploma, degree na masters.
Nikajaribu form 1. Form 1 pia sikufanya vizuri. So nikawaambia wazazi wangu wasipoteze muda kupoteza pesa ya form 1 mpaka form 4, wanisomeshe ujuzi wangu ambao mimi mwenyewe kwa natarajia.
Dr. Teresa Muoma is an education professor at Kenyatta University. She says if these polytechnics did not exist, Kenya would be challenged with a generation of subliterate and unemployed youths.
Instead of taking him through another 4-year rigorous learning and then expose them to another level of exams, then this child, if in these training institutions they will be identified as good carpenters who can make good furniture, and then they are taken through basic skills into complex skills, which will enable them by the time they are 18 years now, when they are getting out of the training, they have skills to make very good furniture.
Ronald Mbele is one such success story. After his primary education, he went straight to Voi Polytechnic for a tailoring course. Today, he runs his own tailoring shop in Voi town and has even employed 2 other tailors.
Hata kama hujapita, lakini ukienda Polytechnic, kuna vile utakavyojikimu, vile utakavyojifunza ujuzi wako ule ambao umekuingia ndani ya moyo. Kwa hivyo mimi nashauri watu wasidharau Polytechnic.
While most polytechnics offer high school dropouts a path into alternative careers, they can also be a stepping stone into higher learning institutions.
Right now, we have 3 technical universities, so the child can move to the technical university, not because he was able to perform excellently well like the other children, but because there is this one skill that he has perfected and he wants to pursue it.
With these vocational training institutions being just one of the options for the underperformers in the KCPE, the question is, with over 50% of those examined performing below average, will these institutions be enough, or should we be rethinking our education system?
That's right. Should we be rethinking our education system across Africa, not just in Kenya alone? And joining me in studio to talk more about this or shed some light on whether or not we might consider changing the curriculum is Professor James Ole Kiapi, who is a former presidential candidate in the Kenya presidential elections that did take place last year. And well, he's been missing in action for quite some time, but now we're actually finding out exactly what he's been up to as he also engages us on the education systems across Africa. Professor, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doreen.
What have you been up to? We haven't seen you since the presidential results were announced.
Actually, I've been taking it easy. I've been resting because I realized I've been working since I was almost like 30. Straight into my 50s without any rest. So after the elections, I took some time off, but also I've been working on a book, my book.
Yes.
Which has taken much longer than I expected. I thought I would finish early sometime last year, but every time I think I've finished, something else comes to my mind, and then I go back. And so I say, let me take my time and really, do it well. So that, when I finish that part of my life, I don't ever have to go back again and write about it.
Okay.
So that's what I've been doing, and I think in the near future I will also just be working with my university in Eldoret, the University of Eldoret, to try and help them do strategic development and those kind of things.
Great.
So I will be busy.
A lot of people would say, I'm going to the farm, I'm, doing a lot of farming now, but it's actually good to know that you are into strategic development at this point in time.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. So now let's get to our topic of discussion, the education system in Africa.
Yes.
At the end of the day, what do you make out of it at the moment? We are looking at a post-colonial education system, but do you think that it's time for us to rethink the curriculum?
First of all, I want to just mention one point and then come to your question. And the point is, what's the most important resource Africa has? There are two most important resources that Africa has relative to other countries all over the world, and these are a young population, a relatively young, youthful population, so many young people. And that is not a liability, that is actually an asset for Africa. It's a resource that we need to turn around because of the energy of the youth and innovation and creativity. We need to harness it and help African countries to take off. Number two, Africa is also endowed with a whole range of natural resources, which again would require a well-trained, human capital to develop and manage the resources. So coming to education, it is long overdue. It's long overdue because at independence, or when most African countries became independent, the first priority was to develop a human resource to replace the expatriate staff that were leaving. And that was a long time ago.
Right.
And therefore, for the last 50 years, I do believe that in most of Africa, we have done that. Our civil services are saturated. We have more than enough of the human resource to run government. So it is now obviously another time scale to move into reforming sort of the markets, the economies, getting the nations to move. And you can't do that if you don't have a human resource that is oriented in that direction.
Right.
And you must do that through education. So it is long overdue, and it has to be done. And when I say reforming education system, you have to begin with early childhood education, ECD, at very basic level. Because in most of Africa, we waste a lot of talents and children, either because they go to school very late, or they never really get that early harnessing or help. And then in the end, kids are picked when they are 8 years old, 10 years old, and that's when they go to class 1. And some of them never even finish.
Right.
And that's why even in Kenya today, we still have a huge number of dropouts. Of course, not to mention other socioeconomic issues like poverty, other cultural barriers, things to do with insecurity in many parts of Africa. Look at what's happening now in South Sudan and in Central Africa. Whenever you have a conflict, the people to be, the group that gets affected the most are the children, because they will not go to school. Some of them, of course, will not even have food to eat, and all sorts of things.
Great.
So you do need a reform, an overhaul, and I think we can discuss that more.
Great. When you talk about an overhaul, we are looking at underemployed youths, and the incident, of course, of youth unemployment seems to be going on and on and on. And when people talk about vocational training in any part of Africa, it's always perceived to be that training that is given to the under-average students or the under-average youths, and it doesn't seem to bring out the fact that it could be preparing people to have the right skills for the labor market at the moment, especially taking into consideration the factors of demand and supply. Do you think that at the end of the day, our education systems or our curriculums in most parts of Africa are encouraging people to go to school and not exactly giving them the right skills to do so?
They are rather circumstantial, as in we have never really radically shifted from the earlier position, which was that we were producing graduates to fill in existing positions, which were positions in government or in public service. We have never really changed the paradigm and said, okay, this is now the time, in order to remain on this single track, where we thought everybody must be academically oriented, everybody must go to university, and if you fall out somewhere on the way, then somehow you'll find your own way out or something else to do. We have not done a deliberate shift as to say, let us create a multiplicity of skills to match the talents and the giftings of the young people, of the children. Because what is really needed is to create multiple tracks. Because there are children, who would like to pursue this academic line, and they can take it as far as they want, all the way to university and beyond. But there are also those others who are gifted in terms of technical skills. And that must not be viewed as a second option. That must be a first option as well. It means that it's another lane. There are others who are very good into sports. That is another lane. There are others who are very good into performing arts, like Lupita Nyong'o. That is another lane. So what we really need to do is, right from the very beginning, from kindergarten to primary, as we go into primary school, kids must already be oriented to think that, you know what, I can be whatever I want to be. And the education system must be engineered to prepare the children to move in that way. Right now, in most of Africa, the education systems are very wasteful, because when kids finish primary school, and you have a huge dropout rate, or very high dropout rates, and also in some cases, after they do the primary exam, exit exam, some of them don't do well, and then basically they end up going to ill-defined, polytechnics or village vocational training.
Yes.
Governments actually need to invest money to develop what we call vocational training, so that vocational training equals work. Education equals work. We are preparing a human resource to go into the job market. There will be those who will look for job in industry. There will be those who will go and create jobs. And there will be those that will still obviously go into the civil service as managers and as leaders.
Great. Now, the question we are asking this afternoon on Africa Speaks is, do you think the education systems in Africa are aiding progress, or are they stagnating it? And of course, we're looking at a curriculum that has got so many subjects all clumped into a specific class. So if there's anything that needs to be changed about the curriculum, what is it? Vocational training, as we all know, is something that, yes, is very good for many of the African nations, but at the end of the day, what training are they getting, and are they even ready for the market? The other question that comes to mind, of course, would be the experience. Half the time when we talk about experience, when you look out for job vacancies in maybe the newspapers or websites or wherever it is, you would always see that the experience requirement would not be less than 3 years. So we're looking at a very youthful African population that might not exactly have this kind of experience that most of these employers are looking for. But what should be done at the end of the day? Tweet us using the handles you're seeing right on your screen, and you can also reach us on Google+, that is KTN Africa Speaks, and we'll be able to reach you right there. Let me just go through some of the tweets that are coming through under the hashtag Education in Africa. Timothy Keter is saying education in Africa is going to be propelled by investment in technology, and that is a smart way of studying on mobile. We also have Liech Onyango, who is saying transform the existing systems to conform to digital era and marketability of the graduates. And we also have SVETS M1, who is saying it's stagnating and killing many talented but academically disadvantaged young people on the African continent. And we also have one that is coming in here from Meshak Kimtai, who is saying the education system, for instance, in Kenya is very irrelevant. The system needs to be changed immediately. But when you look at countries like Senegal, Sierra Leone, and many other countries like Uganda, they found out that education is being denied to African children in incredibly large numbers. A lack of parent involvement, especially as an overseer of the government activities, also needs to be corrected. There is enormous corruption as well that is being seen in the education sector, and this most often has been found to be because parents and communities feel as though they lack any kind of power to regard to their child's education. In Uganda, for instance, only 50% of parents believe that they have the power to influence decisions regarding the education of their child. And in a country like Morocco, that is in North Africa, just 20% of parents believe that they held any sort of power. And these are some of the questions that do come to mind. The notion of continuous adaptation and readaptation of, a flexible and constantly changing labor market is one of the biggest challenges that we have.
There are two. Let's look at both ends of the spectrums. On one side, you have cases where we are sorting out basic issues.
Right.
Issues such as access to education. And when you give references to countries where kids are denied education, there are still places, even in our own country today, where the basic education we are talking about is not available to children, to young people. That's one end of the spectrum. And let's not lose that. Let's not get excited about all this innovation and exciting new developments and forget that we are still also sorting out the basic issues. So we need to continue doing that, and that must continue from kindergarten all the way up. But then going now to the other end of the spectrum, we must then be able to broaden the education system in such a way that we open up these many different options, but also making sure that the education system is relevant. And how do you make it relevant? By creating a connection between the education system and industry, the education system and the market. Right now we have a disconnect. Quite often I hear people in the industry saying, we are producing relevant graduates, these people are not well trained. The question is, who initiates this? Is it the education system,
right,
or is it the industry? And this is why people always say there has to be this dialogue between society and the education system. We must continually ask the question, are we on the right place as far as our education system is concerned? Are we responding to the issues of today? Are we using the right tools to address the education system? A lot of people there talked about the need for digital tools. That's very important. But those are only tools. They will not answer the philosophical question of whether of how and which direction education system should take in any particular country and the investment in education.
So if we are to revisit the curriculum,
yes,
not just for Kenya, but for the other East African and African countries, what needs to change about them? What should be incorporated at the early stages of education? And what should we look at majorly concerning the demands of the labor market that can be incorporated into the curriculum?
First of all, when you look at curriculum, there are obvious things that come around. There are things that are happening today in our world that were not happening even when we were going to school in the 60s and 70s. And therefore, we must think about the place of technology and the role of ICT in education. We must think about environmental and resources, how we are responding to that. We must think about the African values and how our education is bringing that. We must think about the markets. Where are the opportunities? Right now we're talking about oil in Kenya, we're talking about minerals, we are talking about water, we are talking about drought, we are talking about climate change. How then is our education system from primary, secondary to university preparing our young people to harness this or to turn these challenges into opportunities? That is what curriculum is supposed to do. Curriculum is supposed to look at the challenges of the day and then design an education program that turns the challenges into opportunities and create a connection, a strong connection or linkage between the market and the education system. And it has to happen, and it's also a dialogue between parents, key stakeholders, which is the government of the day, the teachers, the parents, the kids themselves, and the community and the leaders. These key stakeholders have to come together all the time. And you cannot change anything unless you are involving the parents, you are involving the teachers and the kids and the government and the community at large. The communities in most of Africa have this sort of mindset or habit that if we send the kids to school, that's okay. That's our responsibility to make sure the kids have gone to school.
Right.
No, we must now encourage a spirit of partnership where they actually participate very actively in deciding what kind of things their kids are learning, including faith or religious aspects. In some places like Israel, there are common courses that everybody will learn. But above that, depending on how many religious groups you have, you are allowed certain number of modules so that you also can inculcate these values into your children, depending on your faith.
Great.
So there's a whole range of things. But the problem always is that we put very little investment in education. Number two, we have tended to remain in that orthodox track of independence of post-colonial Africa. We have never really shifted and said, okay, can we define the education for today?
Great. Now let's look at more of the responses that are coming through our social media. That's on Twitter, and we are seeing one coming in from Mishori Thuku, who is saying, if a student does well in maths and sciences, you know well that's an engineer or a medic and such. Why give the same kid humanities? And also we have Josh, who is saying the education in Africa must shift from what our colonial masters left us with to focus on talents and abilities. And Hambalash, that is Omar Black, is saying education in Kenya needs checks and balances. It seems to be losing its value. And we also have Mishori once again, who is saying, I agree with Professor Kiapi. Our system needs an overhaul. Let's develop talents too. We're so books oriented. And we're having one coming in from Adfocus, who is saying, education in Africa, the educationists seem unable to put its house in order, ironically, and they are the best advisors to others. And well, Jonah is saying, education in Africa can't be realized by commercialization. Upgrade facilities and human resource to student ratio and needs. Musyoki Mule is saying, our curriculum needs to impact skills on the learners and encourage growth of talents. And S. Vets is saying there's need for mental shift, that polytechnics are for failure and school dropouts. Well, as we come to a close of this show, I'm sure there's a lot of questions that people out there have for you, especially aside from the education side. First of all, and top of them all is, are you running for presidency come the next presidential election?
Doreen, I will answer that question with all humility. Running for president is not just some exercise in futilities that like just having some fun.
Right.
It's a very serious affair in terms of personal engagement and in terms of making a contribution to the nation. I do believe that Kenyans must own the political process. I do believe that Kenyans must change the way they elect leaders and shift completely from this tribally or ethnically driven politics to nationally driven politics. So as of now, I will not answer the question what role I will play in 2017. But the question I will answer is that I would like to play whatever role I need to play to make Kenya a better place. If that will mean Kiapi running for president or Kiapi running for governor or Kiapi not running at all, I will always want to make a contribution to this country.
Great. So
as,
on a yes
as a
or
leader
no
in my
basis.
own right, and therefore it is too early to answer that, because in any case they say one day in politics is like millennium. So let's leave it. I want you to call me in 2016. I will answer
2 years
you,
from now,
because I don't want to tell you I'm running and then I change my mind. Well, you know that when I say something, my yes is always a yes and my no is a no. So right now I'm not answering the question. I'm saying that I'm still reflecting.
So what did you think of the results when you looked at the results?
I wasn't concerned as much about the result as the process by which we obtained the results.
Right.
By the way, the results didn't affect me at all. If you were there, I was just laughing at the results. I was truly laughing at the results. And my wife and my kids were saying, what's wrong with you? You should be affected. I said, no, I'm not affected. I think I already knew, even before we went to vote, that I wasn't going to be president. And it wasn't because I was a bad fellow.
Yes.
It was simply because the politics of Kenya is not right.
So there were questions about your running mate. What criteria you used to come up with her? Was it because of her qualifications or?
Well, my running mate, I picked her on the basis of the qualification that I gave. She was qualified. She's a lady. I mean, I wanted to address the issue of gender balance. I wanted to address the issue of regional balance, but I picked somebody that I got along with, somebody who believed in what I believed, somebody who was principled like myself. Now, beyond that, as an individual, I think you should call her one of these days to grill her to say what she really thought. But I had fun. I had a great time. That was the best thing that ever happened to me, running for president of the Republic of Kenya. And if I have to do it again, I will do it again. And I wouldn't change anything, because I told the truth. I spoke the truth. I was very consistent. And I just did what I wanted to do. And I believed, and that's why we go back to education. I believe I have good education, and I believe that my education has made me the person that I am.
Great.
And I'm not going to change simply because people want me to change. I will do the right thing, even if sometimes I have to be alone.
Great. And of course, the final question would be, is this school of thought, especially during the elections last year, people were saying that scholars or learned people are not really good politicians. Do you, what do you have to say about that?
I think, number one, we need one time to discuss again, and maybe you should go and write criteria for, what are the criteria for a good politician? Really, what are the criteria for a good politician? You know, who is a good politician in Kenya? If you meant,
and Africa.
If you and in Africa, if you mean a person who shouts the most and in the end say nothing, then sorry, and then thank you. I'm happy that I wasn't that. If you mean also a person who can say this and mean that, then again, I'm happy I wasn't that. So I'm saying that we have to also redefine politics in Africa. We have to define what we mean by politics. It is not really so much about politics, it's about leadership. The African continent is suffering from lack of leadership rather than lack of politics. And because politicians look only for the next election, but great leaders look for the next generation. As politicians are worrying about, you know, how I will win the next election, really leaders should be worrying about how do we pull and give our children the best education of the 21st century. So for me, academics, we are taught to be very faithful to truth. And that is, as we publish papers, as we do things, we always want to find the truth. And I find it difficult. And people actually told me, Kiapi, how are you going to do politics? Because politicians lie. Are you going to lie this time?
Yes.
I said, let me try the truth and see whether Kenya will buy it. Obviously, most of them didn't buy it, but a lot of them bought it. A lot of them believed even in my message. Even I think you believed in my message. The truth, the challenge was,
I don't know about that.
There was something else. There was some other dynamic about, you know, winning the election. And I think there were a lot of things I learned, obviously. There were a lot of mistakes I also made.
Yes.
Which, if I would run again, I will try to correct. But overall, I think I will still be very faithful to my message, which is that it's about the people, service to the nation, service to Kenyans, all Kenyans, not certain regions, not certain communities, all communities.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us in studio this afternoon. But let me just wind up with a few texts and, a few comments coming through Twitter. Aden K is saying this shift should not just focus on technical subjects. Don't just teach about commerce, teach how to undertake it. And we're having David Awinyo who is saying this is an interesting topic. Both parents and teachers should engage in shaping their students' life. And we're having one that's coming in from Aden K again who is saying the education system in Kenya needs an overhaul. We need a shift to a practical-based system. 844 has failed. And one that is coming in from DJ November who is saying education in Africa should develop talents in people and not only academics. Well, there's so many tweets that are coming through. Exactly.
It's the same thing.
Right. Well, at the end of the day, we all know that at least there's something wrong about our curriculum in the African education system. But thank you all for watching, and we do appreciate the conversations that we're having online. The hashtag to follow is Education in Africa. We were speaking to Professor James Ole Kiapi, who is a former presidential candidate in the Kenyan election and also former permanent secretary. Well, now they are principal secretaries, but he was a former permanent secretary in the previous government. Thank you so much for joining me
Thank you
on Africa Speaks.
Doreen. Thank you, Doreen.
Well, my name is Doreen Biira. Good afternoon.